Hello and welcome to the Educators Podcast. I am Vishal Bagaita, the founder of Educator and your host for this podcast. The Educators Podcast is an opportunity for you to learn more about what goes into creating the learning resources on educator.com. In this episode, we are joined by Woody Lewenstein, an experienced maths teacher. Woody has been developing A-level maths courses, so let's learn more about how he's gone about doing this. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, Woody. Thank you very much for joining me today on the Educators Podcast. Please, could you introduce yourself, providing some insight into your background?
Sure. Hi, Vishal. Thanks for having me on the podcast. Yeah, I'm Woody, and I grew up in Sussex, not too far from Brighton, so that's where I was for the first 18 years of my life, and um, then I went to university in Oxford, so moved over there, and after that I moved to India. I worked in India for a year after that, and then about 10 years ago, when I returned, I moved to London, and that's where I've been ever since, doing all sorts of things. But so that's a sort of very, very brief insight into my background there.
Okay, great. Thank you. And can you tell us a bit more about your interest in maths and how you got started with teaching the subject?
Sure. Well, I mean, maths was always my thing when I was little, along with music. Those were the two things that I really loved doing a lot of, and um, when I was little, I just couldn't get enough of it. And my mum has all sorts of embarrassing stories about me showing off how far I could count and that sort of thing. So it really was an interest and a passion of mine when I was little. And then I it was something, at school I was good at it. It was certainly the subject that I was excelling in most at school and always felt confident with. Um, I think there was a bit of a turning point in my when I was about 17, when I got really interested. I was lucky to have, I had a great uncle who was a huge sort of amateur maths enthusiast, and he was quite an inspiration to me. I mean, he hadn't studied it formally beyond age 15 or 16, but just his whole life had been fascinated by it and had produced all this incredible mathematics. And I really started to get to know him better around then. And I think it was around, I guess I was 16 or 17, in those years, just started to see it as something really, really beautiful and something I could see myself doing a lot of. Um, I really never thought I was going to teach it, though. It remained a sort of just almost a private interest of mine for quite a few years, something I did for fun and like to read about and learn about. And I kind of fell into teaching almost by chance. When I moved to London, I was actually working mostly as a musician at first, and to support myself, I thought I'd do some tutoring, and maths was the one that I was the most qualified to do, and one that I thought I'd be able to do. And as I started tutoring it, and it sort of, a lot of the enjoyment came back. I mean, and also I was reminded how fun I found the A-level course, and just started to really enjoy tutoring it. And part of what I loved, because I taught a few subjects back then, I was tutoring a little bit of science, and even a little bit of English, and for the younger kids. And it was very obvious to me that maths was the one that I liked tutoring. And it was really because of those eureka moments, those kind of aha moments where if I'd explained something well and clearly, I could really see my students get it. And it was like there in an instant, and it might be 10 minutes of struggling with a concept, and then suddenly it kind of, the penny drops. And it was just so different from tutoring other subjects, which I enjoyed doing, which are much more, you slowly get better at writing an essay, and you slowly develop your understanding of history, or even of science. Whereas I really enjoyed those penny dropping moments in maths. So yeah, there's a few years of enjoying tutoring, and then one of my tutoring jobs ended up being in a school tutoring. And it was at that point I thought, actually, I'm actually enjoying being in a school. I'm enjoying my tutoring. Why not try taking the next step? And yeah, I thought I'd have a go at training to be a teacher. And well, here I am years later, still doing it and still enjoying it. And yeah, very much enjoying being in the classroom, and still enjoying that, as I said, that those moments where you kind of see your students really getting it. And that's kind of where my interest in teaching came from, and why it's in particular why it's maths that I like teaching.
Excellent. Okay. You mentioned very early on in your answer there about coming to appreciate the beauty of mathematics. Um, I'm quite interested to know actually if there's a particular incident or particular bit of activity that you would have done related to maths that sort of brought that expression out.
What is sort of in something that I saw or learnt when I was younger that kind of helped me see that beauty.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I can think of a few episodes actually, and I mean some of them sound a little bit daft now in their simplicity, but I'll kind of I'll include those in as well. So, um, I mean, a huge revelation to me when I was very young, when I was learning to count, was this realization that once I had mastered counting to 100, that it was once I'd got that, it was really very easy to go beyond that. And this was something I was terribly excited about. And it's obviously trivial now to think, well, okay, yeah, once you know your tens, your twenties, your thirties, and you get to 100, it's kind of easy to get to 1,000. And once you've got that, I guess the sky's the limit. But that was a kind of very early insight into the kind of infinite nature of maths. The idea that with certain rules and certain understanding and a certain picture in your head, um, we really can have an insight into something which is infinite. So proofs that are true for all numbers. That's quite a beautiful one. And I think my 2-year-old or 3-year-old excitement about counting was maybe a first glimpse of this. There were then plenty more moments at school where I just thought, where my mind was blown. So, um, I mean, often it's the visual aspects of maths that are really exciting. So, certainly when I was learning about sequences and series, which is something that crops up in A level, and I had a teacher who really used to emphasize the visual aspects. It's something I try to do now a lot as well. And they showed me an algebraic proof of an infinite geometric series. So this is, a kind of long series of fractions added up, and they proved to me what the answer was. And that was fine. Okay, I was like, okay, I see that. I followed the algebra. And then they showed me a picture. It was a sort of sequence, almost looked like a sort of kaleidoscope diagram showing these proportionally decreasing triangles. Quite a beautiful image. And kind of talked or helped me figure out what was going on in that picture. And I realized that this picture was a picture of the algebra we had just done, but required no algebra, and just in one image captured this very complicated algebraic proof. So I found that as I got older and sort of developed my understanding of both algebra and geometry, started to find the link between those really rewarding. It's something I try to include wherever I can in my course, that to always, if we can see something visually, try to include that as well, because it's such an enriching way of learning about the subject. So yeah, that was something that really struck me when I was learning it at school.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, I can understand where you're coming from. It's sort of similar experiences looking at, Fibonacci numbers and Mandelbrot sets and things like that. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's nice to know a bit more about where that interest and those moments of clarity about the beauty of the subject come from.
Mm.
So just moving on to what you're working on at the moment. You're creating a series of maths videos. Could you tell us what prompted you to do that?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of reasons really. So for a number of years, I've I've been aware that there's a real uh, a range of resources online for students now, which of course didn't exist when I was at school. Um, and in particular, there are some stunning YouTube channels on sort of fun maths. So YouTube channels like Numberphile or Mathologer, some really good YouTube channels that just make certain areas of maths really accessible and enjoyable, and lots of my students watched these. um, and while there were plenty of um, videos that were touching on the A level, it was usually just sort of going through exam papers, or exam questions, which has its use. And I would direct my students to these, but it was never that engaging, basically. As I, in the back of my mind, I always thought that there is a space there for something which is directly targeted towards the A level, but but more engaging than just working through watching someone do an exam paper, basically. So that was on my mind for a long time. It was really when schools closed because of the COVID-19 pandemic that things shifted, because suddenly I was teaching my students remotely, and I found the most effective way to do this was to create videos. So it was suddenly forced upon me that I had to create videos. So I started from scratch, and my first videos were not very good. And as I got better, and I got myself a proper mic, and I got myself a digital tablet, and kind of gained confidence and expertise in video creation, I suddenly thought, okay, well, I am now actually doing what I had intended to do for the last few years, but never got round to. I am now creating the videos that I think a lot of people could benefit from. So it was a small step from there to say, well, I don't need to just create these for my students at school. I could create something which could be useful to lots more people, to anyone who wanted to access them. So that's how I got into this whole thing. It was this idea from a few years ago that was really forced upon me by the very strange and unfortunate circumstances of 2020.
I see. I can understand. Okay. And the first course actually that you've shared with me, that we'll be publishing on Educator, is actually focused on the transition from GCSE to A level. Um, could you tell us how you decided what to include in such a course?
Sure. So I've been teaching GCSE and A level for years, and I'm currently head of GCSE at my school, but I've also, I teach A level. I've taught in sixth form colleges, and so I know the content very well of each course, and I know the problems that are most common with the transition from GCSE to A level. A lot of students who do really well at GCSE often really struggle at A level, and sometimes they're not sure why. But I think I know why, and it's because there are some key ideas, quite advanced ideas, but key ideas which are absolutely foundational to A level, and other that are in the GCSE a little bit, and other things from GCSE which just don't really feature at all at A level. So there are some students who've really mastered a lot of the GCSE content, but it may not have been the stuff which actually will get you going at A level. So, those key ideas, it's algebra and graphs fundamentally. There's other things. There's solving equations, which is more algebra really, and there's trigonometry as well. But the kind of fundamentals is it, in order to succeed at A level, it is assumed, and this is a big assumption, it's assumed that the student comes in really having mastered the algebra content from their GCSE and their knowledge of graphs, which means being able to solve a quadratic equation, and being able to solve an inequality, and being able to solve simultaneous equations, and basically to do that fairly automatically, and just being really fluent in that. And I realized that plenty of people who've got good grades at GCSE, like they've got maybe a grade 7 or a grade 8, something which is like, a good grade, and yet they never fully mastered these things. And then they start at A level and can really struggle. So I thought what they could really benefit from is a course that just laid out, okay, this is the stuff that you need to be really good at before you start your A level. And if you can get all of this stuff in place, then you're going to be fine with your A level, ready to learn all the new stuff. So that was the sort of content-based thinking. The other thing was specifically this year, of course, the year 11s in 2020 didn't sit their GCSEs. They stopped school in March, and they had this 6-month gap before their A levels. So there's a sort of another motivation this year, which was that actually I think students would benefit from just doing a bunch of maths over the summer. They might not have always, but I did, intentionally make the course. It's not a sort of response to COVID-19 course. It's something which hopefully for a long time touches on all the important topics, mostly algebra and graphs and the applications of those that help them just hit the ground running with their A levels.
Okay, thank you. And thinking beyond the transition course, you've also developed mechanics and statistics courses. Can you tell me more about how these align with the curriculum?
Sure. So the applied part of the A level is can be something that students struggle with initially, because it's quite different from GCSE. And the particular issue, I mean, there's two. There's the issue that we're kind of approaching things from a very different perspective than how we ever did things at GCSE. This idea of modeling the real world, where the model isn't given to you. So you have to look and see what the problem is, and then decide which bit of mathematics models it accurately, and then solve the problem. That's unfamiliar. But the other thing is just how the questions are asked. And so in creating these courses, I spent a long time looking through the exam papers, looking through the all the published material from the different exam boards to kind of check that I wasn't only teaching the content, but also looking at how the content is going to be assessed. I do focus heavily on understanding in the courses, and try not to make it a sort of here's how to pass your exam thing. I want the students to really understand what's going on. But of course, how things are assessed matters to students, because at the end of it all, they're going to be tested on it. So so I looked carefully at how the content was assessed in the different exam boards, and there are some differences between them. For example, in the statistics course, the new syllabus, or new in the last 3 years, has students are required to get to know a large data set, and each exam board produces a different large data set. So and there's the different features of all of those. I also spent some time making some resources relating to those large data sets, so that students were familiar with the sorts of questions that could be asked regarding those data sets as well.
Okay, thank you. So look forward to seeing these courses soon as well, actually. So thank you very much for explaining the background. What I want to now do actually is just move on to a look behind the scenes effectively, and understand a bit more about how you go about creating these courses. In your videos, you use a digital whiteboard to teach. Can you explain why you selected this approach?
Yeah, well, maths is a subject I think you need to see being written, and I'm old enough to remember being taught with chalk and blackboard. I'm also young enough to have seen the first smart boards appearing in schools when I was a student, and I remember my horror when I had a teacher flicking through a PowerPoint in a maths lesson, and I totally get it. And for lots of subjects, it's great, and a lovely way to get lots of visuals in. But in maths, you really got to see pen being put to paper, even if it's digital pen being put to digital paper. You need to see it being written out. So I really wanted that in my course. I wanted students to see me writing it all and sort of be with me every step of the way in that sense, because I think that maths has always been done that way. I mean, go back to ancient Greece, and it might have been a kind of stick stick in the dirt on the ground, or etchings on a papyrus or something like that. But it's always been something that has been, written out with pen and paper, and there were possibly a danger of moving things over to a digital format. Some of that's lost, and so using the digital whiteboard allows students to see me working through it in real time, and nothing just appears there on the page. They actually see me talking through it. I think that's a much more organic way of learning maths, and certainly of doing maths. So that was why I picked the digital whiteboard method there.
Okay, thank you. And you hinted earlier on about how over the years you gradually accumulated the types of accessories you might need to create video content. Could you tell us a bit more about the workflow as well? So just we understand how you go about planning the videos you want to create, and then how you execute that vision, and then finally what kind of effort is required to edit the
Yeah,
content you've created.
yeah. Well, this has been quite a steep learning curve, and it definitely began with just doing it. I mean, just like making a video, not really preparing. And while this was maybe okay for the videos I was sending my students a few months ago, it was once I actually decided to make a course, I quickly realized I had to sort this out. So yeah, the current situation is, I mean, it's quite a long process. I'll try to not bore you with my description of it, but certainly it begins with planning. So that's going to be, I mean, since I've taught this all for years and years, I don't need to plan. I don't need to learn the content. I know that, and I also am very familiar with how things are assessed. But I'll certainly begin by just looking through exam papers, looking through textbooks, making sure that I'm kind of really familiar with all the content, and make sure I'm not missing anything out. I'll then plan out my course, trying to, well, ensuring obviously that every topic that I want in there is covered, and also that a really good range of questions is covered. I usually try to get some feedback on this as well. So I've got a friend who's also a maths teacher who looks over it, and actually my partner's also a maths teacher. So I do get some feedback on the course plan, just to point out, oh, you haven't got any questions on this or that, or maybe you spend a bit too much time on that point. So that's the planning phase, and that takes an awful long time. Then the filming, and well, that's a bit of a performance, because in the transition course, there's there's some shots of me talking to camera, but in the majority of the video you can't see me. Whereas in the A-level courses, there is a little box in the corner where you can see me talking. I sort of thought that'd be a nice addition, make things a bit more engaging, and allows me to sort of add a bit of character to it. So that involves filming with my DSLR, and I've got myself. So yeah, there's lights, there's cameras, there's microphones, there's all sorts. I have a big black background up in my living room now, and lights pointed at me. And yeah, the film process is quite fun, but it does look quite mad if I step back from it and think, God, I've turned my house into this strange little recording studio. And yeah, a lot of technology involved. You need a good microphone. I think listening to bad audio is probably worse than watching bad footage. Ultimately, it's kind of unbearable if the audio is bad. So I've got myself what I hope is a good microphone, and filming it with what I hope is a very good camera. And the filming, well, it takes plenty of time, because of course, well, most videos I don't succeed in filming in one go. I mean, there's usually something I'll look back on and say, I don't think I explained that as well as I could, or I'm not immune to making errors either. So obviously I watch back and think, oh goodness, I've made a mistake in that line and then didn't notice. So I frequently have to go back and re-record, but that's all part of the fun. And I'll record as much as I can in a day. And what I tend to do is I tend to record the entire course first rather than editing as I go. I'll record the whole thing, just get it all there back everything up, put things on hard drives, back things up online, so everything's backed up on more than one place just in case. And then the editing begins, and that easily takes as long as the filming, because there's enormous files from the camera, sort of 5 gigabytes per video. When you watch your 10-minute clip of me, be aware that file was maybe 4 gigabytes or something coming from my camera. So just processing all of that takes a long time. So I then have to stitch together the audio from my mic, the visuals from my camera, and the visuals from my screen. And of course, check through the content, make sure things look good, make sure, I don't know, if there are any errors, I go back and re-record, and do things like, just have little fades in there at the end of the video, and all the things that make it hopefully a pleasure to watch. So that's the kind of workflow. It's look over the content myself, sit down and plan it, get together usually a giant file that contains all of my slides, all my questions, everything I'm going to use, get feedback on that. Then the filming, and that can take, depending on the length of the course, that takes a few weeks to do that. And then the editing, which is just bringing it all together, uploading all of the enormous files onto my computer, editing them, hoping my laptop doesn't burst into flames from processing the amount of data that's trying to do. And then at the end of it all, just putting my feet up and having a couple of days off before starting the next one, because it is quite an effort. You asked what sort of effort is involved, and it's much more than I thought. When I had the idea of making these courses, I naively thought, well, I can put together a video in 20 minutes, and that's that, and I just rattle through it and I'll be done. And it's really been quite humbling to see that, to produce something of high quality that you actually feel pleased with does require an enormous amount of effort. So I have not thought about how long it takes me over on average to create 1 hour of content, but it's certainly days and days and days. So yeah, that's a little insight into my life at the moment, into the world of a content creator. I hope that gives you a sense of what's going on.
Yeah, I think that kind of insight is useful. I think there are a couple of bits of insight which are really good. So, for example, you talked about the backup process, which, when you're dealing with content like this, like video content, which you talked about the size of the files, and the high quality with which you're seeking to sort of get to with the final product, you absolutely want to make sure that you don't lose any of it. And so the backup process is absolutely essential to manage that. But then also the process of uploading files to different destinations or downloading them from different places, that in itself also takes quite a significant amount of time. And I think that's really good that you pointed that out, because that is really the behind the scenes activity which people don't get the visibility of.
Yeah, it's the less glamorous side of it. That the content you see, the stuff that's actually been filmed, is just a small part of the process. Most of which is file transfers, backup, editing, all of the less glamorous things.
Mhm. And just going then back into the content creation side, I was interested to hear a bit more about the style. So it sounded like what you were saying was that you don't tend to script these videos because you're so comfortable with the content. So you've got a topic to cover in the video, and you have the clarity of what you want to say with regard to that. Am I right in thinking you don't actually script it though?
That's right. Yeah, I never script it. I did experiment with scripting some of my content initially, and it just didn't sound right. I'm used to standing in front of a classroom talking to real people, and that's never scripted. And I just realized that's actually what I'm best at, and delivering a script is not my main skill here. And it just sounded a little bit unnatural. So what I tend to do is before I record each video, I'll write down what are the key things I must say, and obviously the the question that I have in front of me is the main prompt and tells me what I need to do. But I will make a list of things I must say. You know, make sure that you, I don't know, point out this potential error and draw students' attention to this interesting thing. And there'll maybe be 4 or 5 points that I'll just jot down to give me a sort of mental note to refer to those. But no, I don't script. I understand that some people do, and that's going to be great for them. But for me, it's always felt more natural to just uh, talk through it in the same way that I would to my class. And I suppose that's sort of the approach I'm going for. I want the experience to be somewhat similar to like an engaging lesson at school. So um, yeah, so scripting it was not really going to be part of that.
Fine. Okay. No, I fully understand that. And then just one other area which might be useful to understand a bit more about is with regard to the editing process. Um, did you try different software packages before you settled on the one that you use, or was there just one that you've used previously and are quite familiar with and just stuck with that?
Yeah, I did try a few. I I currently use one called VideoPad Editor, which is it's not free, but it's sort of the yeah, it's not breaking the bank. Basically, there are some good free ones, but I kept on just butting into certain little issues, just like small things I wanted to do that weren't possible in the free ones. And I found that this was VideoPad Editor for me is not flashy, and I certainly you kind of couldn't make a feature film on it. But for the stuff that I want to do, it was just about right. I've gone through an insane and insanely boring number of different softwares to try to get my videos how I want. Every what tends to happen is every new idea I have, I think, oh, if I do that, that's going to make my life easier in these exciting ways. And then I think it's going to be a small fix, and it turns out being an enormous headache, which ultimately, is worth it. Um, for example, just dealing with my camera footage, I've got a DSLR camera that I film things on, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be great if I could just hook that up to my laptop and use it like a webcam, because I can integrate a webcam into my screen recording, and then it's sort of all recorded in one go. And that turned out to be a huge headache, and just actually getting that sorted. So I actually had quite an enjoyable time yesterday afternoon uninstalling about 12 pieces of software that I downloaded in order to try to get my camera to work as a webcam. I did succeed in the end, but only after trying about 12 bits of software that I wasn't pleased with. So yeah, VideoPad is what I use for the editing. And then I use a program called Screencast-O-Matic for the screen recordings. I also there's actually quite a good one called Open Broadcast Studio (OBS), which is a free one. It's one of these open source bits of software, and there's some sort of real advantages and real disadvantages with the free open source stuff. That obviously the advantage is it's free. Another advantage is they're often really powerful. Like lots of people have added bits and bobs and features over the years. The disadvantage is they're often unbelievably complicated to use. So OBS has been great for getting some of the screencast stuff together, particularly when there are lots of different screens I want to flip between. If I'm doing some talking, doing some writing, showing stuff on a graph, it's been great for that. Screencast-O-Matic has been good for just straightforward screen capture. So yeah, lots and lots of bits of software, but kind of settled on something that seems to be working for me now.
Thank you. And I think that's quite important that the software stack that you use has to fit to your circumstances, to one's circumstances, rather than it being something that could easily transfer to somebody else's situation. So it can take time to get to that right structure for oneself. So thank you very much, Woody, for giving that insight. That's actually quite good to sort of understand a bit more about that process behind the scenes and the approach you took to get to where you are. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. I particularly enjoyed hearing about how you came to love maths. And so I really appreciate you sharing all these stories with us.
Thanks, Vishal. It's been really fun.
All right. Thanks very much, Woody. Take care.
Bye.
I always enjoy hearing about the moment at which someone discovers their passion. So it was good to hear about Woody's moments of clarity. The insights he shared into his content production process were also interesting. If you are interested in uploading materials to Educatool, please send an email to info@educatool.com. You will also find information about getting started on Educatool in the guidance part of the website. Don't forget that you can find links to Woody's courses in the show notes and the social media posts that accompany the release of this episode. If you've got this far, thank you very much for listening. Please do like and share the podcast.